Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video where we'll be exploring some fascinating recent scientific research on mating systems and sexual behavior in humans and animals. I'm excited to dive into this topic with you and unpack some of the key findings and implications that researchers have uncovered. In this video, we'll be taking a look at polyandry, a mating system where females mate with multiple males. We'll explore how common this is across different species, what potential evolutionary advantages it might offer, and how it relates to other mating systems like monogamy and polygyny. Along the way, we'll touch on some really intriguing questions. Why do some species practice polyandry while others don't? What are the costs and benefits for males and females? How does it impact things like sexual selection, parental care, and genetic diversity? And what can studying polyandry in animals tell us about human mating behaviors and social structures? Now, fair warning, we'll be covering some complex scientific concepts, but I'll do my best to break things down and keep it accessible. My goal is to give you a broad overview of what researchers are discovering in this field, without getting too bogged down in technical details or specific studies. By the end of this video, you should have a good grasp of the key ideas around polyandry and mating systems. We'll explore how factors like ecology, life history, and sexual conflict shape reproductive strategies across species. And we'll see how studying diverse mating systems can give us insights into the evolution of sexual behavior more broadly. Whether you're a biology student, a nature enthusiast, or just someone curious about animal behavior, I think you'll find a lot to chew on here. The science of mating systems touches on so many fascinating areas, from genetics to game theory to anthropology. And it can really change how we think about sex, relationships, and social structures in both humans and animals. So settle in, and let's dive into the weird and wonderful world of polyandry and mating systems. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but I think you'll find it's a pretty wild ride. Let's get started. Part 1. What is polyandry and how common is it? Let's start by defining our terms and looking at how prevalent polyandry actually is across species. Polyandry refers to a mating system where a single female mates with multiple males during a breeding season. This is in contrast to monogamy, where males and females form exclusive pair bonds, or polygyny, where one male mates with multiple females. Now, when most people think about mating systems in nature, they tend to picture either monogamous pairs or a male with a harem of females. But it turns out that polyandry is actually fairly common, especially among insects, fish, and some birds. It's been documented in everything from fruit flies to field crickets to pipefish. That said, the degree of polyandry can vary quite a bit. In some species, females might mate with just 2 or 3 males over a season. In others, they might mate with dozens or even hundreds of different partners. And the reasons for multiple mating can differ too. Sometimes it's about direct benefits like getting more resources from males, while other times it's more about genetic benefits for offspring. One important point to note is that just because a species isn't socially polyandrous doesn't mean females aren't mating multiply. Even in species that form monogamous pair bonds, females may still seek out extra pair copulations. So there's often a distinction between social mating systems and genetic mating systems. When we look at the big picture across animal species, we see that strict lifetime monogamy is actually pretty rare. Various forms of polygamy, whether polygyny or polyandry, seem to be more the norm. That said, polyandry does appear to be less common overall than polygyny, especially in mammals. So why is that? Well, it likely comes down to some fundamental differences between males and females when it comes to reproduction. Females typically invest more energy in each individual offspring, while males can potentially sire many offspring with minimal investment. This creates different selective pressures on the sexes. But the interesting thing is that we're now discovering polyandry is more widespread than we used to think. As genetic tools have improved, we're finding that females in many species mate with multiple males, even if it's not obvious from their social structure. So polyandry may be quietly common, even if it's not always obvious. In the next section, we'll dig into some of the potential benefits of polyandry for females, and why it might evolve despite some seeming disadvantages. But first, let's recap the key points. Polyandry refers to females mating with multiple males. It's fairly common in insects and some other animal groups. The degree of polyandry varies widely between species. Social monogamy doesn't always mean genetic monogamy. Improved genetic techniques are revealing cryptic polyandry in many species. Part 2. Evolutionary benefits of polyandry. Now that we've established what polyandry is and how common it is, let's explore why it might evolve in the first place. At first glance, polyandry can seem a bit puzzling from an evolutionary perspective. After all, females can typically only produce a limited number of offspring, so why take on the risks and costs of mating with multiple males? It turns out there are actually quite a few potential benefits that could make polyandry advantageous for females in certain circumstances. Let's break down some of the main ones that researchers have identified. First, there are direct material benefits. In many species, males provide females with nutritious, nuptial gifts during mating. These could be food items, chemical compounds, or even parts of the male's body in extreme cases. By mating multiply, females can collect more of these resources to fuel their own survival and reproduction. In some insects, for instance, these male donations can significantly boost female lifespan and egg production. Another key benefit is fertilization assurance. If a female only mates once, she runs the risk of mating with an infertile male or not getting enough sperm. Multiple mating is a way of hedging bets and making sure at least some eggs get fertilized. This can be especially important in species where opportunities to mate are limited or unpredictable. Genetic benefits are also a major factor. By mating with multiple males, females can increase the genetic diversity of their offspring. This can be advantageous in a few ways. It allows females to trade up if they encounter a higher quality male after mating. It creates a diverse brood of offspring, which may be better able to survive in unpredictable environments. It can help avoid inbreeding depression if females are related to some males in the population. It may allow females to take advantage of good genes or genetic compatibility from different males. There's also evidence that multiple mating can enhance female fertility and fecundity in some cases. The mechanisms aren't always clear, but it may involve stimulation from mating itself or beneficial compounds in male seminal fluid. Another intriguing possibility is that polyandry helps females avoid male harassment. In some species, males can be quite aggressive in their mating attempts. By mating with multiple males, females may reduce the overall level of harassment they experience. Finally, in some cases, polyandry may simply be a side effect of selection on other traits. For instance, if females evolve to be more active or social for other reasons, it may incidentally lead to more mating opportunities. Of course, the relative importance of these benefits varies a lot between species. And polyandry isn't without its costs. It can increase the risk of injury, disease transmission, and predation. So the evolution of polyandry involves a complex balance of costs and benefits. One really fascinating area of research looks at how the benefits of polyandry can change in different ecological contexts. For instance, polyandry might be more beneficial in unpredictable environments where genetic diversity is especially valuable. Or it might be favored in systems where males provide important resources to females. To wrap up this section, let's recap the key potential benefits of polyandry. Direct material benefits from male, nuptial gifts. Fertilization assurance. Increased genetic diversity and quality of offspring. Enhanced female fertility and fecundity. Reduced male harassment. Possible side effect of selection on other traits. In the next part, we'll look at how polyandry impacts males and shapes sexual selection. But first, take a moment to reflect on how these various benefits might play out in different species. The diversity of mating systems in nature reflects the many ways organisms have evolved to balance these complex trade-offs. Part 3. Male adaptations and sexual conflict. So far we've focused mostly on the female perspective in polyandrous mating systems. But what about the males? How does polyandry impact them, and how have they adapted to this mating system? This is where things get really interesting, as we start to see the evolutionary arms race between male and female reproductive strategies. From the male perspective, polyandry creates a major challenge: sperm competition. When a female mates with multiple males, their sperm compete to fertilize her eggs. This puts intense selective pressure on males to maximize their paternity share. As a result, we see all kinds of fascinating adaptations in males to give their sperm a competitive edge. Some examples include increased sperm production and larger testes relative to body size, more motile or longer-lived sperm, seminal fluid proteins that influence female physiology or behavior, mate-guarding behaviors to prevent females from remating, genital adaptations to displace rival sperm or create mating plugs. The extent of these adaptations can be pretty extreme. In some insect species, males have evolved spiny genitalia that can actually injure females during mating, making them less likely to remate. Talk about an evolutionary arms race. Another key impact of polyandry is that it tends to decrease the variance in male reproductive success. In a strictly monogamous system, some males might get no mates while others get one. But with polyandry, most males may get at least some paternity. This can actually reduce the intensity of sexual selection on males in some cases. That said, polyandry also creates new forms of sexual selection through sperm competition and cryptic female choice. So even if the competition to mate is less intense, there's still strong selection on traits that influence fertilization success. All of this leads to some interesting sexual conflicts between males and females. Males are typically selected to mate as much as possible and prevent females from remating. Females, on the other hand, may benefit from mating multiply but also need to minimize the costs of excessive mating. This conflict plays out in all kinds of ways. We see antagonistic adaptations like male harassment and female resistance traits. There can be conflicts over things like mating duration, ejaculate size, and female reproductive physiology. It's an ongoing evolutionary tug-of-war. One particularly intriguing area of research looks at how polyandry impacts paternal care. In some species, uncertainty of paternity due to female multiple mating seems to decrease male parental investment. But in others, we actually see the opposite. Males may ramp up their care as a way of competing for paternity of future broods. The relationship between polyandry and sexual selection also gets pretty complex. While polyandry can decrease selection on some pre-mating male traits, it intensifies selection on post-mating traits involved in sperm competition. And cryptic female choice can create whole new targets for sexual selection. To sum up the key points on male adaptation and sexual conflict. Polyandry leads to intense sperm competition between males. Males evolve diverse adaptations to maximize their paternity share. Polyandry can decrease variance in male reproductive success. But it also creates new forms of post-mating sexual selection. Sexual conflicts arise over mating rates and fertilization. Paternal care can be impacted in complex ways. The nature of sexual selection shifts from pre- to post-mating traits. As we can see, polyandry sets up a complex evolutionary dynamic between the sexes. In the next section, we'll zoom out and look at how these individual interactions scale up to influence things like population genetics and speciation. Part 4. Population-level impacts of polyandry. Now that we've explored how polyandry affects individual males and females, let's consider its broader impacts at the population and species level. It turns out that mating systems can have some pretty profound effects on things like genetic diversity, population viability, and even the process of speciation. One of the most significant effects of polyandry is that it tends to increase the effective population size. In genetic terms, the effective population is the number of individuals that contribute genes to the next generation. When females mate with multiple males, more males get to pass on their genes, even if it's just a small fraction. This helps maintain genetic diversity and can make populations more resilient to inbreeding and genetic drift. This effect on genetic diversity can be especially important for small or endangered populations. Some research suggests that polyandry might help threatened species avoid inbreeding depression and maintain their adaptive potential. It's an intriguing idea that multiple mating could actually help some species avoid extinction. Polyandry can also influence the distribution of genetic variation within and between populations. By increasing gene flow and mixing up genetic combinations, it might help species adapt more quickly to changing environments. Some scientists have even suggested that polyandry could help some organisms cope with climate change, by increasing the genetic variation that selection can act on. Another fascinating area of research looks at how polyandry impacts sexual selection and the evolution of sexually selected traits. As we discussed earlier, polyandry can actually decrease the variance in male reproductive success in some cases. This might weaken selection on certain flashy male traits used to attract mates. However, polyandry also intensifies post-mating sexual selection through sperm competition and cryptic female choice. This can lead to rapid evolution of traits involved in fertilization, like sperm morphology or biochemical interactions between eggs and sperm. Some researchers argue this might even promote reproductive isolation between populations and contribute to speciation. Speaking of speciation, there's some really interesting work on how polyandry might influence the formation of new species. One hypothesis is that post-mating sexual selection in polyandrous species could accelerate the evolution of reproductive barriers between populations. This could potentially speed up the speciation process. On the flip side, by increasing gene flow, polyandry might sometimes work against speciation by keeping diverging populations genetically connected. So the overall effect likely depends on the specific circumstances and the relative strength of these opposing forces. Polyandry can also impact the evolution of sex chromosomes and sex-linked traits. In some polyandrous species, we see unusual sex determination systems or rapid turnover of sex chromosomes. The intense sexual selection and sexual conflict in these systems seems to drive some pretty dramatic genomic changes. At the community level, mating systems can influence things like population dynamics and interspecific interactions. Polyandrous species might have different population growth rates or responses to environmental change compared to monogamous ones. This could affect their ecological relationships with other species in the community. There's even some research looking at how mating systems might influence macroevolutionary patterns like speciation rates or extinction risk across whole taxonomic groups. It's a complex topic, but there's some evidence that polygamous mating systems, including polyandry, might be associated with higher diversification rates in some animal groups. To wrap up this section, let's review the key population-level impacts of polyandry. Increases effective population size and genetic diversity. Can help small populations avoid inbreeding depression. Influences the distribution of genetic variation within and between populations. Alters patterns of sexual selection and trait evolution. May impact speciation processes and reproductive isolation. Can drive unusual sex chromosome evolution. Affects population dynamics and community interactions. Might influence macroevolutionary patterns in some taxa. As we can see, the effects of mating systems extend far beyond individual interactions. In our final content section, we'll take a look at polyandry in humans and some of the controversies around applying animal research to human mating patterns. Part 5. Polyandry in humans and primates. Now we come to perhaps the most controversial and complex part of our discussion: polyandry in humans and our closest evolutionary relatives. This is a topic that intersects biology, anthropology, and some pretty heated debates about human nature and society. So let's try to untangle what the science actually tells us, while being mindful of the limitations and potential biases in this research. First, it's important to note that humans show incredible diversity in mating and marriage systems across cultures. While monogamy is the most common form of marriage globally, we see examples of polygyny, one man, multiple wives, in many societies, and a handful of cases of socially recognized polyandry, one woman, multiple husbands. That said, official marriage systems don't tell the whole story. Even in monogamous societies, people often engage in multiple mating through affairs, serial monogamy, or other arrangements. So there's a distinction between social mating systems and actual genetic mating patterns. When we look at the genetic evidence, it's clear that humans have a history of mild polygamy, meaning both polygyny and polyandry. We're nowhere near as extreme as, say, elephant seals, but we're also not strictly monogamous. This fits with what we see in our closest primate relatives, which show a mix of mating systems but tend towards mild polygamy. One interesting line of evidence comes from looking at human physiology and anatomy. Our moderate sexual dimorphism, difference between males and females, and relatively large testes size for our body size suggest an evolutionary history of both male-male competition and sperm competition, hallmarks of mild polygamy. There's also fascinating research on human seminal fluid proteins and their effects on female physiology. Some of these proteins seem to function to promote a male's chance of fertilization success in the presence of sperm competition, again suggesting an evolutionary history involving some degree of polyandry. When we look at traditionally polyandrous human societies, they tend to occur in very specific ecological and social circumstances. The most well-known examples are found in certain Himalayan cultures, where polyandrous marriages typically involve a woman marrying a group of brothers. This seems to be an adaptation to scarce farmland and the need to keep family estates intact. But it's important to note that these socially recognized polyandrous marriages are extremely rare globally. They're the exception rather than the rule. What's more common is what anthropologists call informal polyandry, where women have socially recognized sexual relationships with multiple men, even if they're only officially married to one. This brings us to the complex topic of female sexuality and sexual behavior in humans. Traditionally, evolutionary theories tended to assume that women were relatively sexually passive and monogamous compared to men. But more recent research has challenged this view, suggesting that women may have evolved to seek genetic diversity in their offspring through multiple mating. Some researchers argue that various aspects of female sexuality, like concealed ovulation, extended receptivity, and even the capacity for multiple orgasms, might be adaptations that facilitate polyandrous mating. The idea is that these traits allow women to mate with multiple partners while obscuring paternity, potentially gaining genetic benefits for offspring. However, it's crucial to note that this remains a contentious area of research. Critics argue that some of these theories rely too heavily on animal models or make unfounded assumptions about our evolutionary past. There's also the risk of confirmation bias, researchers finding what they expect to see based on their theoretical framework. Another important point is that even if humans have some biological capacity for polyandry, that doesn't mean it's inevitable or natural, in any prescriptive sense. Human mating behavior is heavily influenced by culture, individual choice, and specific social circumstances. We can't simply extrapolate from other animals to human behavior. When we look at other primates, we see a wide range of mating systems. Some, like gorillas, tend towards polygyny. Others, like chimps and bonobos, show more promiscuous mating patterns. Interestingly, among primates, there seems to be a relationship between mating systems and sexual dimorphism. Species with more polygyny show greater size differences between males and females. Humans fall somewhere in the middle of this primate spectrum in terms of dimorphism and apparent mating patterns. This suggests the evolutionary history of mild polygamy, but not extreme polygyny or polyandry. One intriguing area of research looks at how agriculture and the development of socially imposed monogamy might have shaped human evolution in recent millennia. There's some evidence that the shift to monogamous marriage norms might have altered selection pressures on things like male-male competition and sperm competition. To sum up the key points on polyandry in humans and primates. Humans show diverse mating systems, but socially recognized polyandry is rare. Genetic and physiological evidence suggests a history of mild polygamy. Some argue female sexuality shows adaptations for polyandrous mating. But this remains controversial and we should be cautious about overgeneralizing. Other primates show diverse mating systems related to sexual dimorphism. Humans fall in the middle of the primate spectrum for these traits. Recent cultural evolution may have altered selection on mating patterns. As we can see, the topic of human polyandry brings together threads from biology, anthropology, and psychology. It's a complex issue that resists simple explanations or sweeping generalizations. In studying it, we have to be especially careful about distinguishing between scientific findings and cultural assumptions or personal biases. As we wrap up our exploration of polyandry and mating systems, let's step back and consider some of the broader implications of this research. What have we learned, and how might it change the way we think about sexual behavior and evolution? First, I think one of the key takeaways is just how diverse mating systems are in nature. From strict monogamy to extreme polygyny or polyandry, there's an incredible range of strategies that animals use to reproduce. This diversity reminds us that there's no one natural, or correct, way for species to organize their mating. Rather, different strategies evolve to fit different ecological and social circumstances. Another crucial point is the importance of considering both male and female perspectives in sexual selection. Historically, there was often a bias towards thinking about male traits and male competition. But as we've seen, female behavior and female choice play a huge role in shaping mating systems and driving evolution. The study of polyandry has really highlighted the active role that females play in sexual selection. We've also seen how mating systems can have far-reaching effects beyond just who mates with whom. They influence things like population genetics, speciation processes, and even broad evolutionary patterns. This underscores how central reproduction is to evolution. Changing how organisms mate can alter the whole trajectory of a species. The research on polyandry has also revealed just how complex and subtle sexual selection can be. It's not just about flashy traits or aggressive competition. Things like sperm competition, cryptic female choice, and molecular interactions between eggs and sperm all play crucial roles. This hidden world of post-mating sexual selection is an exciting frontier in evolutionary biology. Another key theme that emerged is the evolutionary conflict between male and female interests. While cooperation between the sexes is obviously necessary for reproduction, we also see lots of antagonistic coevolution. This push and pull between male and female strategies is a major driver of evolutionary change. When it comes to humans, I think the research on polyandry and mating systems provides some valuable perspective. It reminds us that human sexuality and mating behavior is complex and influenced by both our evolutionary history and our cultural circumstances. We should be wary of oversimplified claims about what's natural for humans based on animal studies or evolutionary theories. At the same time, understanding the evolutionary context of human mating can provide insights into some aspects of our psychology and behavior. It can help explain some of the tensions and complexities in human relationships. But we always need to be careful about how we apply this kind of research, and remember the enormous role of culture and individual variation. More broadly, I think this field of study highlights the power of evolutionary thinking for understanding the diversity of life. By considering how natural selection shapes reproductive strategies, we can make sense of all kinds of seemingly bizarre adaptations, from elaborate courtship displays to weird genital morphology to complex social systems. Finally, I think research on mating systems and sexual selection has important implications for conservation and biodiversity. Understanding how animals reproduce is crucial for protecting endangered species and maintaining the health of ecosystems. As environments change due to human activity, mating systems may need to adapt, and some species may be more vulnerable than others. In conclusion, the study of polyandry and mating systems opens up a fascinating window into the processes of evolution and the diversity of life. It shows us how the most fundamental aspects of biology, sex and reproduction, can drive all kinds of evolutionary changes. And it reminds us that nature is often more complex and surprising than we might assume at first glance. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in our exploration of polyandry and mating systems. I hope this overview has given you a sense of the fascinating research happening in this field and some of its broader implications. As we've seen, the study of how animals mate can tell us a lot about evolution, ecology, and even human behavior. It's a field that brings together all kinds of scientific disciplines, from molecular biology to animal behavior to anthropology. And it's constantly evolving as researchers develop new techniques and uncover new insights. If you're intrigued by what we've discussed today, I encourage you to dive deeper into this topic. There are so many fascinating questions still being explored. How do changing environments affect mating systems? What role do mating strategies play in speciation and extinction? How has human culture interacted with our evolved mating psychology? What can we learn from diverse mating systems to help conservation efforts? These are just a few of the exciting areas of ongoing research. Whether you're a student considering a career in biology, or just someone curious about the natural world, there's always more to learn about the wonders of animal reproduction. I also want to emphasize the importance of approaching this topic with an open and critical mind. As we've seen, mating behavior can be a controversial subject, especially when it comes to humans. It's crucial to look at the evidence carefully, consider multiple perspectives, and be aware of our own biases and assumptions. Remember, understanding the biology of mating systems doesn't tell us what's right or wrong in human societies. But it can give us valuable context for thinking about our own relationships and social structures. It can help us appreciate both our connections to other animals and what makes humans unique. So I encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep marveling at the incredible diversity of life on our planet. Every species has its own fascinating story when it comes to reproduction, and we're constantly discovering new surprises. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What aspects of mating systems do you find most interesting? What questions do you have about this research? Your engagement helps me know what topics to cover in future videos. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the weird and wonderful world of animal mating. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the amazing world of biology.